Okay, here's my story. It's about a time that changed everything for me. My name is Sarah, and I suppose, comfortable in my quiet life. My husband, Tom, had been gone for 5 years, and the kids, bless them, were grown and had lives and families of their own far away. The house, Tom's and my house, felt big. Not in a grand way, just spacious. Echoey sometimes. I had my routine. Coffee, the newspaper. Yes, I still like the feel of paper. A bit of gardening, my book club on Tuesdays, and looking after the old house. It was a good life, a peaceful one. But if I'm honest, there was a quiet hum of loneliness beneath it all, like a fridge you don't notice until it suddenly stops. The storm wasn't supposed to be that bad. They never are they? Just a lot of rain, the weatherman said. But it kept coming. Buckets and buckets, day and night. The river, usually a gentle ribbon at the bottom of our town, started to swell and grumble. I live on a bit of a hill, so I wasn't worried for myself, not really. But I watched the news, saw the pictures from the lower parts of town, and my heart just ached. People on roofs, water lapping at their doors. It was awful. The third day of rain, the river properly broke its banks. It was a Tuesday, my book club day. But of course, it was canceled. The power flickered and died. I had my gas stove, candles, and plenty of tinned food. Tom was always one for being prepared. I remember standing at my living room window, watching the rain lash down, feeling so helpless. The local radio, crackling on my battery-powered set, was full of desperate calls for help and announcements about shelters opening up. The high school gym, the church hall, they were filling up fast. Then a thought, small at first, like a little seed, popped into my head. My house, it's big. 3 spare bedrooms since the kids left. A big living room, a dry kitchen. The thought scared me a bit. Strangers? In my house? Tom's and my house? I'm a private person, mostly. But then I pictured those faces on the TV, the fear in their eyes. Sarah, I said to myself out loud, what would Tom do? And I knew. Tom had a heart as big as this house. He'd have been down there in a rowboat if he could, pulling people out. So, I did something I'd never normally do. I found the town's emergency Facebook page on my phone. The internet was still working, miraculously. I typed, my fingers trembling a little. Dry house with spare rooms available on Elm Street, number 12. Can take a few families. Have food and warmth. Sarah Miller. I hesitated before pressing post. This was a big step. But I did it. The silence afterwards felt huge. Just the rain drumming on the roof. I made myself a cup of tea, my hands still shaking. What if no one came? What if everyone came? It wasn't long. Maybe an hour. A knock on the door. Not a polite tap, but a hard, urgent banging. I opened it to a young couple soaked to the bone, shivering. The woman, Maria, was clutching a baby wrapped in a damp blanket. The man, David, just looked exhausted, his face pale. Are you Sarah Miller? He asked, his voice hoarse. Yes, come in, come in. I ushered them into the warmth. The baby, Lily, started to cry, a thin, tired wail. Our apartment. It's gone, Maria whispered, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the rain. We saw your post. We didn't know where else to go. My heart just broke for them. All my worries about strangers vanished. These weren't just strangers. They were people who needed help. I got them towels, dry clothes from Tom's old wardrobe for David, one of my old warm dressing gowns for Maria. I heated up some soup. Lily, once she was dry and had a little warm milk I thankfully had, Long Life, another of Tom's preparations, quietened down. I settled them in my daughter Emily's old room. It still had the pale yellow walls and the teddy bears on the shelf. Maria just looked around, then at me, her eyes full of a raw gratitude that made my throat tighten. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you." Before they'd even finished their soup, there was another knock. This time it was an elderly gentleman, Mr. Henderson. He was leaning heavily on a cane, his clothes drenched, a small, soggy bag clutched in his hand. He'd been rescued by a boat from his flooded bungalow. He was quiet, dignified, but his eyes looked lost. I gave him my son Michael's old room. He just nodded, a silent thank you, and sat on the edge of the bed, looking at his wet shoes. And so it began. Over the next few hours, more people arrived. A volunteer in a big truck brought a family of 5. Brenda, a single mom with her 3 children, Sam, who was about 10, little Emily, another Emily, who was 6, and a toddler, Jack. And then 2 teenagers, Leo and Chloe, whose parents were helping with rescue efforts, but wanted their kids somewhere safe. By nightfall, there were 10 people in my house, besides me. The power was still out, so we lived by candlelight and the glow of torches. It was chaotic. People were wet, tired, scared. There were tears. There was the smell of damp clothes and fear. But there was also soup. I made vats of it. Vegetable soup, chicken soup. Luckily, I had a well-stocked pantry and freezer. Tom used to joke we could survive a siege. Turns out, he wasn't far wrong. That first night, I didn't really sleep. I lay in my bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my house. A cough from Mr. Henderson's room. Little Jack's soft whimpers, quickly shushed by Brenda. The low murmur of Maria and David talking in Emily's old room. My house, usually so quiet, was alive with the sounds of strangers. And yet, it didn't feel invaded. It felt full. Full of people who needed a safe harbor. The next morning, the rain had eased a little, but the town was a mess. No power, no running water in many places. My water was still on, thank goodness. The first challenge was the bathroom. 1 bathroom for 11 people. We made a sort of rota. It was awkward, but people were surprisingly patient. Breakfast was porridge and toast, made on the gas stove. The kids, Sam and little Emily, were subdued at first, their eyes wide. Leo and Chloe, the teenagers, seemed a bit lost, glued to their phones until the batteries died. Then they looked even more lost. But slowly, something started to happen. Brenda, despite her own worries, jumped in to help me in the kitchen. "Let me, Sarah," she'd say. "You've done enough." Maria, when Lily was sleeping, would quietly tidy up, folding blankets, washing cups. David, who was a handyman by trade, fixed a dripping tap in the kitchen that I'd been meaning to get to for months. He just found Tom's old toolbox and got on with it. "Least I can do," he said with a shy smile. Mr. Henderson, bless him, was a quiet soul. He'd sit in Tom's old armchair by the window. When the power was off, it was the best light for reading the one damp book he'd salvaged. Sometimes he'd just stare out at the garden, a wistful look on his face. One afternoon, he found my old knitting needles and a ball of wool. He started knitting, a bit clumsily at first, but then his hands remembered the rhythm. He was knitting a little blue bonnet. "For the baby," he said softly, not looking at me. "My wife, Alice, she taught me. Long time ago." My heart ached for him, for his loss, but also swelled with a gentle warmth. The children were the first to really break the ice. Little Emily found my old box of crayons and paper. Soon, she and Sam were drawing pictures of rainbows and houses on stilts. Even Jack, the toddler, was happily scribbling. Leo and Chloe, bored without their phones, started playing hide-and-seek with them. I hadn't heard children's laughter in my house for so long. It was like music. We fell into a routine. I'd get up early, start the coffee, thank heavens for my old stovetop percolator, and the porridge. Brenda would be up next, helping get the kids sorted. David would go out to see if he could help with any cleanup efforts in town, coming back. tired but with news. Maria looked after Lily, but always found time to ask if I needed anything. The teenagers, Leo and Chloe, surprised me. Once they got over their initial shock of no Wi-Fi, they became quite helpful. They'd entertain the younger kids, help carry things, even offer to wash dishes. Badly at first, but they learned. The house was noisy. It was messy. My usually pristine kitchen always seemed to have a pile of dishes waiting. My quiet solitude was gone. And you know what? I didn't miss it as much as I thought I would. One evening, after a simple dinner of pasta and tinned tomatoes, we were getting creative with the pantry staples. We were all gathered in the living room. The candles cast flickering shadows on the walls. Mr. Henderson was telling a story about his childhood, about growing up on a farm. The kids were listening, rapt. Even Leo and Chloe were paying attention. Maria was gently rocking Lily, humming a soft Spanish lullaby. David was whittling a small piece of wood he'd found in the garden, making a little bird for Sam. Brenda was mending a tear in little Emily's teddy bear. I sat in my usual chair, Tom's chair, and just watched them. These 15 strangers. Yes, a few more had trickled in over the next day or so. A young student whose flat was flooded, and a mother, Sarah like me, with her teenage son Mark, whose car had been swamped while trying to leave town. My house was bursting at the seams, and my heart felt full. Not just full, but warm, like a hearth that had been cold for too long and was now radiating heat. These people had lost so much. Their homes, their belongings, their sense of security. And yet, here they were, in my living room, sharing stories, helping each other, creating a little pocket of warmth and community in the midst of chaos. The gratitude was an unspoken thing, mostly. It was in the way Maria would make sure I had a cup of tea before she made one for herself. It was in David's quiet fixing of things around the house, a loose doorknob, a squeaky floorboard. It was in Brenda's tireless help in the kitchen, her cheerful "Morning, Sarah," even when I knew she hadn't slept well. It was in Leo and Chloe offering to read to the younger kids, giving Brenda and me a break. It was in Mr. Henderson's carefully knitted blue bonnet, which he presented to Maria for Lily with a shy, proud smile. It was in the way young Mark helped me carry in firewood for the old stove in the dining room when the nights got colder, even though it wasn't strictly needed with the gas heating back on eventually. The other Sarah, Sarah K, as we called her to avoid confusion, was a teacher. She started organizing little lessons for the kids, Sam, Emily, and even tried to engage Leo and Chloe with some history discussions. Mark, her son, was quiet like Mr. Henderson, but he had a knack for technology. When the power came back, on intermittently, he managed to get my old computer working better than it had in years and helped people contact their relatives. The young student, Ben, was a musician. He'd saved his guitar, carrying it above his head through floodwater. One evening he started playing. Soft, gentle tunes, then some more upbeat ones. Soon, little Emily was dancing, Jack was clapping his hands, and even Mr. Henderson was tapping his foot. Maria started singing along to a familiar folk song, her voice surprisingly sweet. It was magical. My living room, usually so quiet, was filled with music and laughter. It wasn't all easy, of course. There were tense moments. Worries about what would happen next. When would they be able to go home? What would be left of their homes? There were tears shed, anxieties shared in hushed tones. One day, little Sam overheard some adults talking about how long the cleanup would take, and he burst into tears, crying for his own bed, his own toys. Brenda hugged him tight, her own eyes wet, and I saw David put a comforting hand on her shoulder. We were all in it together. The biggest thing I noticed was how people looked out for each other. If someone seemed down, another would quietly offer a kind word or a cup of tea. When a new batch of donated clothes arrived at the temporary town hall, David and Leo went down to see what they could find for everyone. They came back with odd bits and pieces, but shared them out fairly. One afternoon, I was feeling a bit overwhelmed. The sheer volume of washing, the constant cooking, the noise. I stepped out into the garden, even though it was damp and gray, just for a moment of peace. Maria followed me out. "Are you okay, Sarah?" she asked, her voice soft. I tried to smile. "Just a bit tired, dear." She put her hand on my arm. "You are doing so much for us. We can never repay you." Her eyes were shining with unshed tears. "Nonsense," I said, patting her hand. "It's just a house. You all needed somewhere safe." "It's more than a house," she said. "It's a home. You've made it a home for us when we had nothing." Her words stayed with me. A home. I hadn't thought of it that way. For so long, it had been Tom's and my house, then just my house. Now, for a little while, it was our home. The gratitude wasn't just in words, it was in the actions. One day, I came downstairs to find the kitchen spotless. Brenda and Sarah Kay had got up extra early and cleaned everything, even wiped. Down the cupboards. They'd made a fresh pot of coffee and laid out breakfast. "Surprise?" Little Emily chirped, beaming. Another time, I mentioned my back was a bit sore from sleeping on the old camp bed I'd given myself. I'd insisted the proper beds go to my guests. The next evening, David and Mark had rigged up a more supportive mattress for me using some spare cushions and a board they found in the garage. "Should be a bit better now, Sarah," David said, looking pleased with his handiwork. Even the teenagers, Leo and Chloe, showed their thanks in their own way. Chloe loved to bake, and when I managed to get some flour and eggs, she made a huge batch of cookies. They weren't the prettiest cookies, a bit burnt around the edges, but they were made with such care. Leo, who was surprisingly good with technical things, helped me sort out my ancient television so we could get some news channels more clearly. The days turned into a week, then nearly 2. The floodwaters slowly receded. News started to come in about which areas were safe to return to, which houses were damaged beyond repair. The mood in the house shifted. There was hope, but also a new kind of anxiety. The future was uncertain. Slowly, people started to leave. David and Maria were among the first. A relative in a nearby town had space for them. The morning they left, Maria hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs would crack. "I will never, ever forget this, Sarah," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "You saved us. You saved Lily." David shook my hand, his grip firm. "Thank you. For everything." Little Lily, nestled in Maria's arms, gave me a gummy smile. I watched them walk down the path, and my own eyes welled up. It felt strange, saying, "Goodbye." Mr. Henderson was next. His son, who lived a few hours away, finally managed to get through and came to pick him up. Before he left, he pressed a small, clumsily wrapped package into my hand. "For you, dear Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's not much." Inside was a pair of knitted wrist warmers in a soft gray wool, beautifully, if not perfectly made. "To keep your hands warm," he said. I hugged him, this quiet, dignified man who had shared my home and his stories. Brenda and her children were able to move into a temporary trailer set up by the council. The kids were excited about having their own little place, but little Emily clung to my leg when it was time to go. "Will we see you again, Sarah?" she asked, her big eyes searching mine. "Of course, sweetie," I said, my voice a bit shaky. "We're neighbors now, in a way." Brenda gave me a fierce hug. "You're an angel, Sarah, a real-life angel." Leo and Chloe's parents came to collect them, full of their own stories of the rescue efforts and overflowing with thanks for keeping their children safe and sound. Sarah Kay and Mark found a short-term rental. Ben, the musician, was going to stay with friends. One by one, they left. Each goodbye was a little pang in my heart. The house grew quieter. The piles of washing diminished. The constant chatter and laughter faded. The last to leave were a family I haven't mentioned much. The Parkers, a mum, dad, and two older children who had arrived midway through, their home completely inundated. They were quiet, always helpful, and profoundly grateful. Mrs. Parker, before they climbed into a relative's car, took both my hands. "You didn't know us," she said, her voice breaking. "You didn't have to do this, but you opened your door and your heart. You reminded us that there is good in the world, even when things seem so dark." And then, they were all gone. I stood in the doorway and watched the last car drive away. The street was quiet. The rain had stopped days ago, and a watery sun was trying to break through the clouds. I walked back into my house. The silence was deafening. It was the same silence I had lived with for 5 years. But it felt different now. Before, it had been an empty silence. Now, it was a silence full of echoes. Echoes of children's laughter, of whispered conversations, of music, of shared meals. I walked through the rooms. Emily's room, where Maria and David and Lily had stayed. The faint scent of baby powder still lingered. Michael's room, where Mr. Henderson had quietly knitted. My living room, which had been the heart of our temporary, bustling community. It felt empty. But not in a sad way. More in a waiting way. I sat down in Tom's armchair, Mr. Henderson's knitted wrist warmers on the table beside me. I picked them up, feeling the softness of the wool. I thought of all those faces. 15 strangers. They had come into my life, turned it upside down, filled my house with chaos and noise and life. And they had left, but they had left something behind. More than just memories, their gratitude. It wasn't just words. It was in every small act of help, every shared smile, every thank you that came straight from the heart. And it had filled up a space inside me I hadn't even realized was so empty. For years I'd been Sarah, Tom's widow. Sarah, the quiet lady in the big house. Now I felt like just Sarah. But a different Sarah. A Sarah who had been needed. A Sarah who had made a difference, however small. The next few days were strange. I tidied the house, washed the last of the bedding, put things back in their proper places. But it wasn't the same. I'd find a stray crayon under a sofa cushion and smile. I'd see the mark on the door frame where David had measured how tall. Sam was growing and feel a warmth spread through me. My book club friends called, full of concern and admiration. "Sarah, you're a hero," one of them said. I laughed. "Hardly. I just had a dry house." But I knew deep down it was more than that. I had opened my door, yes. But in doing so, I had opened myself up too. To connection, to community, to the raw, beautiful mess of human life. A week later, I got a knock on the door. It was Maria and David, with Lily. They'd come back to town to try and sort through the remains of their apartment. "We wanted to see you," Maria said, handing me a small pot plant, a bright pink cyclamen. "To say thank you again, properly. We had tea in the kitchen, just like old times, but quieter." Lily babbled and reached for my spoon. It felt so natural, so right. Others kept in touch. Brenda sent me a card with drawings from Sam and Emily. Mr. Henderson's son called to say his father was settling in well and sent his love. I even got an email from Chloe, the teenager, with a recipe for slightly less burnt cookies. My life didn't magically transform into a whirlwind of social activity. I still had my quiet days, my routines. But something fundamental had shifted within me. The loneliness that had been my quiet companion for so long had receded. It was still there sometimes, a faint whisper, but it no longer defined my silence. My house, Tom's and my house, no longer felt too big or too empty. It felt warm. It felt like it had fulfilled its purpose, not just as a shelter for Tom and me and our children, but as a sanctuary for others in their time of need. And me? I felt more alive than I had in years. The gratitude of those 15 strangers. It wasn't just a pleasant feeling. It was like a gift that had unwrapped parts of my own heart I had kept closed for too long. It showed me that even in the midst of loss and fear, kindness could bloom. It showed me that connection was a powerful thing. I started volunteering at the town's recovery center, helping sort donations, making tea for people who had lost everything. I wasn't afraid to talk to strangers anymore. I'd see someone looking lost or overwhelmed, and I'd remember those first few faces at my door. And I'd go over, offer a kind word, a listening ear. Sometimes I walk through my quiet house, and I can almost hear them all again. Lily's cry, Sam's laugh, Mr. Henderson's gentle cough, Ben's guitar. And I smile. Because they weren't just 15 strangers. They were people who, in their darkest hour, had brought light into my life. Their gratitude didn't just change them, it changed me. Forever. It taught me that an open door can lead to an open heart, and an open heart can make a world of difference, not just to others, but to yourself. The hum of loneliness is still there sometimes, a very faint background note, but now it's overlaid with a richer, warmer melody. The music of connection, of purpose, of a house that was once just a house, but became, for a short, intense, unforgettable time, a home filled to the brim with life and love and the purest, most heartfelt gratitude I have ever known. And that, I've come to realize, is a truly beautiful sound. It's the sound of my own heart, fuller and warmer than it had been in a very long time. The gratitude wasn't a payment. It was a reflection, a mirroring back of the humanity we'd all shared. And in that reflection, I saw myself more clearly, and I liked the person I saw. That was their greatest gift to me.